And hello, everybody. Welcome to this WMBF Sports Special here, live streaming on our website. We are so excited for March Madness, at least I am. I think it's one of the favorite, or my favorite times of the year. We finally have this thing, a nice paper bracket. The brackets are out. We have it right here behind me. I'm going to go through every pick and everything you need to know coming this March Madness. We have 4 South Carolina schools in the tournament, 3 in the men's, and then 1 in the women's team. The South Carolina Gamecocks, the #1 unanimous overall seed. We'll talk about them later in our newscast. We have been all week. We're waiting to see what their matchup is going to be Wednesday night. We have 2 16 seeds playing who are going to play South Carolina in that first round game. But when it comes to the men's tournament, there's nothing but excitement. I think a lot of people might be a little disgruntled with who the committee, how they seeded this thing. I don't think there were a lot of arguments, maybe outside of a few Big East teams like St. John's that didn't get to make the field. But I think when it all comes said and done, we're just excited that there's a bracket. I won't talk too much, maybe I will, about the seeding and things, because one of the matchups I do want to talk about is Clemson, and they did kind of get hurt by how the committee seeded these teams. So let's go ahead and start with just kind of an overall what you need to know about the bracket. One of the things is, one of the few things that's guaranteed, and it's not even guaranteed anymore, is go ahead and just punch all the 1 seeds and maybe even the 2s ahead to the first round. But after that, it might be anybody's ball game. Now we know 2 16s have upset 1, so we can't say that it's never happened anymore. But still, the chances of it happening are so slim, it might not be worth it when you're going ahead and making your bracket. So go ahead and put the 1s through. The 2s, a 15's won a handful of times, so your odds are getting a little worse there. And then 3s and 4s, it gets tougher. I do like the 3s and 4s this year. We have some strong teams there. We'll get to that in a second. But that's kind of just the overall what you need to know. That's the easiest part. It really gets harder after that. The #1 overall seed was the UConn Huskies. They're the defending national champions, and some might argue that they're even better this year with Klingon playing now a major role. He was behind Sonogo, who was the player of the year last year in the bracket. So to have a team that was the defending national champions and be even better this year is quite crazy and hard to pick against. I'm going to do it personally just for upset's sake, and it is March Madness for a reason. We're going to see some madness. It's just predicting where is always the hard part. So let's go into the bracket. Ours is a little out of order maybe than yours at home in here, so I'm going to update or pull up big whatever section I'm talking about. And we'll start with those UConn Huskies out here in the East. It's the top left in your bracket. And like I said, you can go ahead and move that 1 along, and things don't get easy for them in the second round. You have a Florida Atlantic team and a Northwestern team. The 8-9 games are right around a 50-50 toss-up at all time. It's almost dead even. So go ahead and flip a coin, pick wherever your cousin went to school on that one. It's a coin flip game. Florida Atlantic, though, I want to note, did make the Final Four last year. Their record isn't as good this year, but they played in a better conference. So, you know, go ahead. I'm going to say that phrase, coin flip, a lot in this. San Diego State, another team that made the Final Four last year. UConn, theoretically, is supposed to get the easiest section of the bracket. I'm not quite sure that was the case this year with 2 teams that were in the Final Four last year that they're going to have to face early in this thing, potentially, if you don't see upsets. Auburn ranks statistically, when you ask the computers, as one of the best teams in the country. I really like this Auburn team. I'm going to have them going far in this thing. BYU and Duquesne there, the Dukes, they haven't made the tournament since the 70s, so they might be a nice Cinderella to pick if you just like storylines like that. Go ahead and pick a team to get their first win in 40 years, 50 years, whatever that is. Illinois, another team that ranks really high, one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year. You have Washington State and Drake. Drake's another team that hasn't won a game in a long time. And then Iowa State is a team that a lot of people said should have been #1 or the 4th #1 seed. I'm one of those people. So for a Connecticut team to get Auburn and Iowa State, 2 teams that honestly could be 2 seeds in this thing, all in their section of the bracket, it's going to be tough. A lot of people have UConn coming out of here. I'm going to say that Auburn upsets them if they both make it that far. And then I would also have Iowa State going far. It's questionable if we end up getting those matchups, so I'm not going to spend too much time picking each and every matchup here. We're going to try to spend more time on those first rounds and just give you like an overview of who has a shot at this thing. But if you're not going to go with #1 UConn, I would say Auburn and Iowa State are probably your best shots in the East. So let's go over to the number 2 overall seed. That's Houston. That's the top right on your bracket, and that's the South region. This Houston team, best team in the best conference all year. They only lost a handful of games, 3 or 4 games. Most recently to that Iowa State team I just mentioned in the Big 12 championship. Houston, I'm not going to lie, might be my pick to win this entire thing. Houston is very good. The computers love them all year. They were the number 1 team in the country for a majority of the season up until that final game. But again, for them, it is not easy in this 8-9 game in the second round. Nebraska and A&M both are quality opponents here. I went ahead and ranked. I do a weekly ranking every week, Dave's Dugout Top 40. Dave's Dugout used to be a podcast I hosted. And those are 2 teams that were in the 30s for a majority of the season. And then I went ahead and made an average ranking of all of the metrics, the AP poll, the coaches poll, and I averaged all those scores together. Nebraska and A&M, they're 27 and 48 in the top 50. So quality top 40 matchup here. I kind of like Nebraska, but A&M is a team that was picked to win the SEC in the preseason, so we'll see if they play like that. And Wisconsin and James Madison. We all know this James Madison team because they play in the Sun Belt against Coastal Carolina. And there's 2 former Coastal players that I'm going to highlight too once we get to their teams. And then obviously I'm going to talk about Clemson and South Carolina and their matchups extensively here. But Wisconsin, a team that was ranked high in the season, they kind of stumbled down the stretch, lost quite a few games late in the month, or it's this past month. James Madison could be a great, people love these 12-5 games because they do happen quite often, not more than often, but they do happen. So James Madison could be a great sleeper pick for you. I'm going with it in mine. Duke and Vermont, this Vermont team's not quite as good as other teams that have made the tournament. I actually used to work in Vermont. I know that team really well. Not their best team that they've had in March, though, and Duke is another team that has been in the top 15 all year long in the AP poll. So Duke could be a sneaky one that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. A very young team, but a very talented team. They, along with Kentucky, who are in this bracket, are 2 of the scarier teams in this entire tournament just because of the talent and how many future NBA players they're going to have one day. Texas Tech and NC State, that is a great game too. NC State coming off that Cinderella-like run in the ACC tournament, and then Texas Tech is just a quality Big 12 team. The Big 12 ranked as the best conference all year, and they were in the mix there for quite a while. I mentioned Kentucky. Florida still awaits that play-in game winner tonight. It's going to be Boise State and Colorado. 2 dangerous teams. Honestly, I might pick either of them over Florida, although Florida showed spurts too of being really, really good this season. And then you have Marquette, who is maybe could be your team if you don't want to go with Houston, but they've been hurt. Their best player, Tyler Kolek, has not been healthy, didn't play in the Big East tournament. So we're going to wait and see what Marquette team shows up, because if Tyler Kolek's healthy, he's one of the best teams, players, if not maybe the best point guard in the entire country. So Marquette could be a really, really good team to watch there. So just a quick overview. If you want to go, we call it chalk if you go with all the number 1 seeds. If you don't want to go with Houston here, I would say Duke is scary, Kentucky is scary. Maybe the winner of that 8-9 game in Boise State or Colorado could make a run. Marquette, if healthy, could really be in the Final Four. But when it all comes said and done, this is the only region where I'm picking my 1 seed. A lot of people are saying Houston's going to be the first one to fall. I think Houston's going to be the only team that makes the Final Four. So kind of a hot take for you there. Then we'll go down to UNC's side of the bracket. They ended up, North Carolina being the 4th number 1 seed. North Carolina, maybe a lot of people here are North Carolina fans. I ironically am wearing kind of North Carolina blue, but I do have North Carolina going out earlier than most, so maybe that's not a good sign. But I guess let's start here with Clemson, because a lot of Clemson fans in the area. And I was really hot on this Clemson team all year. They were pretty much in my top 40 all season long. Let's see where they ended. They ended the season average ranking at 33. And here's the crazy part. The team that they're playing is a lower seed than them, but New Mexico average ranking is 25 as an 11 seed. So Clemson, and with the Vegas odds, the Vegas spread is 2.5-point favorites for New Mexico. So it's an 11 versus 6. That's what you try not to get caught up in these rankings because sometimes they can really mess you up. New Mexico, the favorite in this one, and I love this New Mexico team. Jalen House absolutely cruised through the Mountain West tournament. They won the Mountain West tournament, and one of the better teams. I have them in the top 30 in my rankings. Clemson as well, right there on the border, top 40 team, like I said, all year long. But Clemson did not get any favors in this one. So the 22nd, so that's going to be a Friday game in Memphis. So not too far if you want to travel and go to that game. And so I wanted to focus on that. But North Carolina, the #1 seed in this region. Again, these 8-9 games, I really like them this year. Mississippi State and Michigan State. Michigan State, very strong computer numbers. When they show up, they can beat anybody. They beat Baylor this year, who was ranked in the top 5 at the time, or the top 10. But they've lost a lot of games. They lost like 13 games this season. Mississippi State, though, is a team in the SEC that I think we really need to watch. I narrowly have Mississippi State going on, just because Michigan State has been so what team's going to show up. Mississippi State's at least been a little more consistent, and I think Mississippi State could really give North Carolina a run for their money. I don't know if I'm going to quite go with it, but I'm very close to leaning that way. St. Mary's, a team that in the preseason was projected to be one of the better teams in the country, kind of rode in the AP top 25 all year long. But this Grand Canyon team is electric. One of the few teams that won 30 games. They won 31 games this season. And when you get teams like that have only 2-3 losses, we'll talk about James Madison too, they're just used to winning. And somehow in March, that seems to correlate. They're not used to losing. They don't want to lose. They're not afraid of these so-called giants that they have to play in the Power 5 conferences. And that is actually a Bryce Drew-led team, Scott Drew's brother from Baylor. If the March Madness universe may allow, we could see the brothers coaching against each other. It would be a stretch for the 12 seed, and Baylor could have to play either Clemson or New Mexico, which either way is going to be a tough game. Alabama is a classic. What team's going to show up? We really have no idea. They shoot a lot of threes, and so does this Charleston team. So for anybody that likes Charleston, went to Charleston, might know people that went there, it's our closest school to Myrtle Beach in the field this year. So if you want to go with the team closest to home, it's actually not even Clemson or South Carolina. It's our 3rd team in the tournament in this 13 seed in Charleston. Charleston played Coastal Carolina twice this year, I believe, and last year as well was another really good team. Saw them in person. They shoot a lot of threes, and they're really good at it, kind of like what Alabama does. So this game could be in the 90s and the hundreds, and I think Charleston has a real shot to win, and I'm actually going to pick that as a big upset there. Not a lot of people going against Alabama. So let's go with the local team in Charleston and hope they can get it done. Mentioned Clemson, New Mexico, Baylor and Colgate. That could be a close one. Colgate's a team that's beaten Syracuse quite a few times in the past seasons, so they're not afraid of playing these big Power 5 teams. But I have Baylor moving on. Dayton and Nevada is a great game. Dayton over the last few years, they were going to be a pick to win the Final Four in that year that got canceled because of COVID. Dayton could have been a Final Four team. They're not quite that good this year, but they could certainly give a Nevada team a run for their money. But that's a classic coin flip game. So go ahead and do that and move on with your bracket. And then Arizona, a really good 2 seed as well, the best team in the Pac-12 in the last year of the Pac-12 this year. But they didn't win the Pac-12 tournament, so they ended the conference or ended the season really in kind of a way many might not have expected. And then we have Purdue in the final, in the Midwest region, in the final region we're going to preview. They have the best player in the country in Zach Edey. They're going to try to, if you like storylines, they're going to try to do what Virginia did quite a few years ago when they were the first team ever to lose as a #1 seed to a 16, and then came back the next year and won the whole thing in dramatic fashion. Can Purdue do that again? I know a lot of people pushing that through just to see it happen. I would love to see it happen. I'm not going to pick it in my bracket because I'm going to be rooting for it just as a basketball fan to see Purdue kind of redeem themselves. But if you don't trust them, they have lost to a double-digit seed the last 3 tournaments. So if you think that's going to happen again, go ahead and try it. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but the last 3 years have shown us that they do. But there's an asterisk in that too. People love to say that to kind of hinder Purdue's tournament runs, but one of them was in the Sweet 16. They did lose their double-digit seed, but once you make it to the Sweet 16, it's obviously a quality team. Utah State and Texas Christian, again, these 8-9 games, all 4 of them I really like, and I really like their shot at the number 1 in the next round. So that's why I'm not as easy or quickly to put all number 1s in the Final Four this year. Not saying they're all going to lose, or any of them, but I do think there's a shot. Utah State outright won the Mountain West this season. They were picked 9th to finish the Mountain West this year in the preseason. So a Utah State team that won one of the better conferences, got 6 teams into the tournament. The Mountain West was really, if you didn't get to stay up late a lot this year, I know it's a lot of West Coast schools. I watched a lot of Mountain West basketball this year, and they are really good. I think the SEC, the Big 12, and the Mountain West all should have maybe multiple teams in the Sweet 16. I expect those 3 conferences to kind of run through this thing. Gonzaga is a team we all know now. They've been really good for almost as long as I've been alive, the last 20 years. They have one of the longest streaks in making the bracket, along with Kansas, who's in this section as well. And they have the longest streak, actually, of making Sweet 16s. Every time in the last, I believe it's like 8 years, they've made the Sweet 16. This might be the one time where you bet against them. And then, you know what, in Gonzaga fashion, Mark Few, future Hall of Famer, maybe the year we're all picking them to fall early is going to be the year they finally make the Final Four. I mean, they've done it several times, but maybe they could do it again. I really like this McNeese State team, though. It's a Will Wade coach team. He used to coach at LSU, and there's a strong chance that McNeese State wins this game. And I'm actually going with it with a 12-5 upset. You have to pick a couple of those, or at least one. You don't have to, but one is likely going to happen. None actually happened last year after, I believe, the year before, all of the 12s won. So all of the 5s then won last year. So maybe we'll have some parity this year. Kind of breaking news, actually, out of Kansas this morning. Bill Self said late last night or early this morning, that their best player is not going to be in this thing. So Samford, I already was seeing a lot of people picking them as an upset, but Kevin McCullough is not playing. He actually said he's not going to play in the entire tournament. He's shut down. He has a bone bruise in his knee, I believe. Kevin McCullough might be their best player. Hunter Dickinson also was supposed to be their best player all year, but those 2 were just so good, led the Big 12 in scoring. So this is scary. This is scary for a lot of people because you expect Kansas to just do what Kansas does, but without their best player, and they were already a short lineup with only 4 or 5 really quality starters for a Kansas team at least. This Samford Bulldogs team is coached by a coach his first year. He used to be a high school coach, and they run the floor really fast. They try to tire you out, and for a Kansas team that's going to be shorthanded, that does not spell a recipe for Jayhawks fans that I think they're going to like the outcome. So I actually have the 12 and the 13 meeting up there, so we're going to have a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. Either way, if both of those win, because somebody has to win the next game. And then South Carolina and Oregon. South Carolina, again, like Clemson, did not get any favors done to them by the committee with the way they seeded this thing. Oregon arguably should not be an 11 seed, and I think South Carolina is better than a 6 seed. I have South Carolina much higher in my personal rankings. I had them, I think, in the top 14 or top 12. I think the way they cruised through the SEC, one of the better conferences in the country, should have been evaluated a little more. The preseason, they were picked to come in dead last in the SEC. That did not happen, and I think that bias kind of lingered for too long. I think they proved that they could beat quality teams all year long, and they did. So South Carolina, very scary. I'm going to narrowly ride with South Carolina. A lot of people are picking Oregon because Oregon just won the Pac-12 tournament. Nafali Dante is finally healthy, and but I'm not. I think that might have just been. They had a little extra motivation. I think winning the last Pac-12 tournament ever. So we'll see if they can kind of. That might have been the mountaintop. You don't know. They could ride that momentum through now, but I think that's going to be hard for them to keep that as focused as they were there. Creighton is a sleepy, sneaky good team at 3 against the Zips in Akron. They might have maybe the best mascot name. If you're picking mascot names, the Zips might be a hard one to go with, so maybe pick your 14 there. But this Creighton Blue Jays team, I actually have going to the Final Four in this region just to stick away from the 1s and 2s. Creighton was a play away last year from making the Final Four, and they practically have the same team back this year. Texas and Colorado State is a great. Texas is a good Big 12 team. They might not be one of the best. I'm so torn on this one because I really do think the Big 12 and Mountain West are going to do good, and here they are meeting up. One's going to have to get knocked out in the first round. I might lean Colorado State. They just won their play-in game last night in convincing fashion against Virginia, so we'll see what they can do there. And then Tennessee and St. Peter's, the Peacocks, they were the Cinderella just a few years ago. Everybody knows the Peacocks now. Not the same head coach for the Peacocks, though, so I don't trust them anymore. I guess no one did last time either, though, so we'll see if they can make a run again. That Tennessee team, though, with Dalton Knecht, if it weren't for Zach Edey, could be the player of the year this year, so that is a really fun team to watch. Rick Barnes' teams have struggled to score in the past at Tennessee. That's not the case anymore. They still have a really good defense like they always have, and now they have Dalton Knecht who can score 40 in a night, which he's done this season, and he scores 30 regularly. So that's kind of a look at all of the first round ones, at least a brief look at where you need to, who you might like to push things around. I know everyone likes Final Four picks, so I guess I'll have to do it. I have Auburn coming out of the top left region in your bracket. I have Houston, my only number 1 seed. I have Creighton, the number 3 in the bottom right of your bracket. And the bottom left, I think, is the most wide open, at least if we get the madness I'm predicting. I really think the winner of the Baylor-New Mexico game could make it to the Final Four, or will make it to the Final Four. I don't want to pick Baylor just because I think people will say I have a Baylor bias there. So I'm going to go with an 11 seed in the Final Four there in New Mexico. It's a win-win for me then, because then if Baylor beats them, then they beat the team I thought that was going to make the Final Four. So then you'd have a 4, a 1, a 3, and an 11, which kind of is what we normally more see so than all number 1s. It did happen once. It was one of the first years I really started diving into March Madness. I believe it was 2008. We had all number 1 seeds, but that's the one and only time that's ever happened. So if you want to predict it happens again, maybe, a lot of North Carolina fans in the area, because the other 3 really pulled away this entire season. We're going to obviously watch the South Carolina, Clemson, and Charleston games very closely. We'll have all those highlights for you on WMBF News. And then if you'd actually like to join a pool, I made 2 on ESPN.com on the Tournament Challenge. You can go ahead and join those. One is free. They're called Stoplight Enthusiasts, because who doesn't love sitting at red lights? So one is a $10 Venmo if you're into doing that, but the free group is easy to join. You can just search Stoplight Enthusiasts on ESPN.com and join that just for bragging rights. Go up against my bracket. Now you know the teams I pick, so you can do the opposite, and you'll probably do a lot better. But we'll keep you up to date on all of this, and obviously we hope that Clemson, South Carolina, and Charleston go really far in this thing, and it'd be something very interesting to cover. The 2 things I wanted to mention with Coastal Carolina, 2 former players. We have Utah State, Josh Udije, if you're a fan of the Cliff Ellis show, interviewed him quite a few times last year. He's actually playing at that Utah State team that won the Mountain West, so he's getting some quality minutes there. He's not quite starting, but to be on a team in March and being one of the better teams and one of the better players on one of the better teams in the country is really amazing. And then another one for TCU was, oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on his name, of course. The big fella, Issam Mustafa, is now on TCU, also playing quality minutes at TCU. So if you like to have a local connection and you want to have a coastal connection on former players, TCU and Utah State would be the 2 to go for there. But I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up for me. If you stayed with us this long, I appreciate it. And we're going to try to stream things more often for you here with WMBF Sports. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope that helped at all. I hope that didn't make you more confused than you were when you started. Hopefully a little insight there, at least my favorite sport. So I'm glad to do it. And thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.